everyone, welcome back to Dees Nerds. I'm Michelle, and today we're going to be doing a review of Midnight Sun by Stephenie Meyer. So if you were ever a fan of Twilight, this book was probably highly anticipated by you. There was a whole scandal with it back in about 2008, 2009, where some things were released that were in progress, and she was so upset about it that she never finished the book. So I think it was a book we never thought we'd see, and then all of a sudden, poof, in August, we got it. So the thing about Midnight Sun is that it's the same story as Twilight, except it's from Edward's point of view. And there's some pros and cons to that, and I'll talk about those here in a minute. But I think that the important thing to remember is that Edward is a very, very different character than Bella. So we have her human perspective not knowing a lot of what's going on, so she spends a lot of time doing guesswork. And then we have his perspective as a vampire, knowing exactly what his situation is and really trying to deal with how that works with her. So things immediately that I noticed when I started reading this book are that Edward's point of view is far more interesting. He is a more interesting character. He has a longer history because he's been alive for much longer as a vampire. I suppose alive, if you want to get technical about it. But he's been a vampire for much longer, so he has a lot more history and a lot more experience. I think where that really works well is that you get to talk to him or hear from him more about his family and the other vampires and their origin stories and where they came from and what they're like and his relationships to them. One thing I thought was particularly interesting was these kind of one-sided conversations that he often has with his family, since he can hear people's thoughts. So it wasn't unusual in the book for him to have a conversation with someone where one of them is thinking things to him, he's hearing them and then responding back in a whisper or in a low voice that only they could hear as a vampire. So that was pretty interesting in some different parts, especially when they wanted to keep certain things private or when some things were going on that it was really essential that they not say things out loud that weren't absolutely necessary. So I thought that was pretty cool. The other part of it is that we get the other side of events in moments where in the book Twilight, he's actually not present with Bella. And since the whole of Twilight is from Bella's perspective and she isn't always with him, there's quite a bit there actually. So initially when they first meet and they're in biology class and he gets that whiff of her and then he, gets out of the room and he can't wait to get away from her because he's afraid he's going to hurt her. He disappears for several days after that. And so we actually get to see what he was doing and why he was doing and how he was feeling throughout all of that. And some conversations that he has with Emmett about, what it feels like to have that scent on somebody that's so strong to you that your impulse is so strong to bite them. And so I think we got some interesting perspectives there that were, again, a lot more interesting than what Bella was going through at the time, where she was just whining because he was mean to her. Bella definitely comes off as more whiny, I'd say, for more of the book, although Edward has those moments. The other part that I found really interesting from his point of view was the chase with James. So when James scents Bella when they're playing baseball and he decides he's going to go after her, initially Edward goes with her, helps her get packed, and then when they get back to the Cullens' house and they split up, in Twilight we only ever see what happens to Bella and Alice and Jasper. And so we're only following the three of them. So now we actually get to see what Edward was doing during that point and actually see a little bit more too of how James works and how he hunts and how he thinks. So that was a pretty interesting detour from what we had gotten before. And I think, again, it was a lot more interesting, that side of the story. And then also seeing how some of Alice's visions played in with their day-to-day stuff. Because we only get Alice's visions very peripherally in the original grouping of books. And so in this, we're actually able to see Edward's immediate reactions. Every time Alice has a vision, she has like almost a web of things that happen and things that could happen. And she can kind of roll through all of that and show him very quickly what his possibilities are if things go down a certain way. And she sort of gives him the odds, so to speak, of what certain things might happen more so than others, depending on how clear the vision is. So some of that takes place in the fight with James, as well as all throughout the book as he makes different decisions in regards to Bella. Now, of course, with this book, there were also some things that I was not so crazy about. So one of those things is, and it's just part of what you're going to get with this type of thing, because it's from this perspective of the other character, but they are sometimes together, you get some repeated conversations. and they're conversations that I remember and aren't necessarily ones that I need to relive. The only difference is that you might get a little bit of Edward's thoughts about what's being said as it goes. But overall, sometimes it was a little bit tedious in moments where there were long periods where there wasn't a whole lot of internal dialogue and we were just getting directly what happened that I already knew happened. The other thing was that got on my nerves, and I think this is maybe just a quirk of Twilight as it is. I think it was a quirk of the original grouping of books. But Edward is annoyingly obsessed with Bella in some spots. Not that he's being like a stalker. I mean, he kind of is, I suppose. But he's obsessed with her and her being human. And so up to a certain point, he's willing to spend all this time with her, but his constant nagging in the back of his mind is, I need to leave her. I need to leave her. I need to leave her. I need to get away from her. And it's tolerable up until about the last, 20, 30 pages of the book when the whole thing happens where she gets gravely injured with the fight with James and is in the hospital and he's talking to her. And of course, in Twilight, what we get is her perspective of being panicked that he's going to leave her. But what we're getting with him in this one is infuriating because he keeps telling her that he loves her and he won't leave her. But then he would say immediately after he said these things aloud to her, and in his mind, to us, the readers, he's saying, I'll leave her when I can build up the strength, when she's safe again, when she's whole and well again. And it just kind of made me want to hit him because that's what causes all the horrible events of Eclipse, which for me is the worst book of the original series. I hate that book. But I do think that it's a good book. I think if you were into Twilight and found Edward interesting, if you were Team Edward especially, I think this is a really good one. I'm curious to see what she does going forward, if she continues with this series from Edward's perspective. And I think where I'm most interested to see that difference is in Breaking Dawn, because in Breaking Dawn, we had a switch between Bella's perspective and Jacob's perspective. So I guess my question on that would be is if we do that, do we have Edward's perspective and a different one of the pack? Do we have just Edward's perspective when we just leave out that stuff because we've already seen it? That's what I would be curious to know. And I think it'll be interesting to see what she decides to do there. But I would definitely read the rest of them if she writes them. I wouldn't say that I'm a diehard Twilight fan, but I did enjoy the series, and I've watched all the movies and do own all the movies, although I would definitely not judge the books based upon the movies. So if you've only ever watched the movies and had any interest in them whatsoever, I would definitely say pick up the books instead, because the movies, while they do increase in quality with each one, they're still not masterpieces of cinema. The books are a little better. So anyway, I give this book 4 stars out of 5. I think it's worth a read if you're into it, but if you were never really into Twilight to start with, it's probably not going to be a book for you. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell for notifications if you want to know when we're posting new videos. We're also now on Facebook, Instagram, and newly on Twitter, so be sure to find us there. We'll leave the handles below here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you all have a great, safe rest of the day. Bye!